One of the main problems with modern day Judaism per se, also Christianity, but this particularly about Judaism, is that they seem to forget that the Torah was not given in a 21st century Western culture context. It was not given today to apply to our modern day living. It was given 3,500 years ago to a people who just got out of Egypt and were now dwelling in the Sinai desert for 40 years. Quite different. And so when it comes to things like Pesach, which is one of the biggest things in the Torah, one of the biggest events of the Hebrew people, the event that really symbolizes salvation, the redemption, restoration, reconciliation, is the biggest high holy day, really. Also embodies within itself the Day of Atonement with the blood of the Lamb smeared on the doorpost and the door frames. In case you Christians did not know that, Yeshua was Jewish. He was the Pesach lamb, the Passover lamb. He came to fulfill the festival of Matzah, which is what we are about to celebrate this coming Wednesday night, April 1st, from twilight, which is just before sundown. That is when we celebrate the Pesach. And then for the next 7 days, it is the Feast of Matzah. The first day is a holy day, which is like Shabbat. That would be April 2nd, considering the day begins in the evening of April 1st. So from April 1st at evening until April 2nd evening, it is a holy day. That is the first day. And then you have the rest of the days. I think if we got one, and then we got 5 more days of regular days, and then the 7th day is a holy day again. You can pick up the book of Leviticus chapter 23 and figure it out for yourselves if you don't want to do as I tell you, but that's fine. Nevertheless, the point here is this. The Torah wasn't given today. The people that left Egypt did not have grocery stores, supply chains, supermarkets. They didn't go to a business and buy matzah. Matzah was not some luxurious item that you had to make sure it is super kosher or reserved matzah and pay hundreds of shekels for it. No. The whole purpose of the matzah was that they had to live in a hurry. They were rushing to get out of Egypt and they did not have time to ferment their dough. So what is matzah? Matzah is unleavened bread. What is leaven? Hebrew is chametz. Chametz has the same connotation as chamutz, which is sour. It is the thing in the bread that makes it sour. Namely, when you make sourdough, you use a thing called a sourdough starter, that is the chametz, which is a culture of wild-caught yeast that ferments the dough. It breaks down the sugars in the flour and it exerts carbon dioxide, which makes your dough rise. That's how you make bread. But in the proper historical context, when you actually read the Torah in the context in which it was written, there was no such thing as baking soda, baking powder, and even dry instant yeast. They had no stores, there was no industry. Everything they had was natural. And leaven, chametz, is in the air. Yeast are everywhere. And whenever you take some flour and you mix it up with water and you let it sit, it will start fermenting. That's how you make sourdough. If you've ever done it, and if you haven't, I'll just give you a quick summation of how it works. You take flour and water, equal ratios, you put it in a little jar and you let it sit for a day. The next day you stir it up with a little spoon and you let it sit for another day. Then you add equal amounts of water and flour again and you let it sit for another day. Then you add more flour and water and you let it sit for another day. Some people throw away half just to make sure it doesn't keep growing. But basically you add flour and water day after day after day after day. In about 6 to 7 days, you'll see that your what is liquid dough, pretty much, it is very wet dough, starts rising from the day before to the day after. It looks like it doubled in size. That's because you now have chametz. There is a culture of wild yeast and bacteria that now has reached a very large level of their population that they are able to completely ferment your dough. And now, if you want to bake bread, what you do is you take a portion of that chametz and you put it in a fresh batch of flour mixed with water and a little bit of salt. You mix it all together, incorporate it, and you let that sit for about 6 to 7 hours. And since you have such a strong culture of yeast, they will ferment your dough and you will see that it doubles in size within 6 to 7 hours, and then you can bake it and have your bread. That is how they used to make bread back in the day. They didn't have, like I said, instant yeast. There was no such thing. So back to the context of chametz, the people in ancient cultures, they didn't have refrigeration also, so for them every bread was sourdough bread. That is just how bread was made. And typically what they did is whenever they made a dough, they took some out of the dough. They took a small portion out of the dough of the bread and put that aside. They baked the main dough, turned that into a bread, and the portion they set aside they used to ferment now a fresh batch of dough. And that's how it continues. You constantly took the dough from yesterday, a portion of it, into the dough of today to ferment it and cause it to rise, rather than wait the entire week again to start a new culture of yeast and bacteria. And that is what was called chametz, the thing you bring from the past into the present in order to turn it into what you had before. Which, in baking, nothing wrong with it. We do it also with sauerkraut, which is cabbage. Sourdough, sauerkraut, it's all the same family. Fermented foods, fermented pickles, we pickle cucumbers. It's all the same principle. You can take some of the previous batch, put it in the new batch, and it speeds up the process. Because you're bringing in all of that probiotics, all of the yeast that has multiplied and fermented before. But the principle of Pesach, the Passover, is to detach from the past. It was a day of deliverance. The people of Israel were delivered from Egypt. And the Lord wanted to separate them and start them fresh. He wanted to get rid of all of the chametz of Egypt. All of that paganism and idolatry and all of these Gentile practices and everything that they did in Egypt. It was symbolic. I don't want you to stay there long enough that you start fermenting yourself. You have no time. You're living in a hurry. Therefore, he told them to bake bread without chametz, meaning don't let it ferment. Mix your water, mix your flour, put a little salt. You can put a little olive oil and bake it. You can cook it on a pan, you can bake it in an oven, you can do whatever you want, roast it on a fire, doesn't matter. The point is, you do not use the chametz from the day before or let it sit for hours until it develops its own chametz. And it's not something that happens so quickly that you have to be in a rush when you make your matzah. Chametz, like I said, takes days initially if you haven't put any chametz to begin with. If you haven't put any yeast, any added leavening agents, your bread is not going to leaven within a few minutes to a few hours, really. But when Pesach comes around, he told the people of Israel for 7 days, no chametz shall be seen in your houses. You shall eat unleavened bread, matzah, as a symbol of complete purification, a detox, like so many of you do in the West. A detox from the chametz of Egypt. I want you pure, I want you clean, I want you fresh. And unleavened bread, the matzah, is really a representation of the Word of God without any additives to it. I don't want your man-made doctrines. I don't want your traditions. I don't want you to add to these commandments. I don't want you to subtract from them. He said, do everything I have told you. Do not add, do not subtract. Do not lean to the left, do not lean to the right. And for Christians, people who acknowledge the Mashiach, Yeshua, he was the unleavened bread. He was the matzah. He was the one that observed perfectly the Torah of God every commandment without leaning to the left or the right. He did not add, he did not subtract. He was the perfect Torah-observant Jew. That is why, in the Last Supper, he broke the bread, which was the matzah, unleavened bread, and he said, "This is my body that is broken up for you. Do this in memory of me." And he took the cup of the wine, which was symbolic of the blood of the covenant. His blood that was spilled for us to seal the new covenant, and was also a symbol of the blood of the lamb smeared on the doorpost and the door frames, so that everyone who take his shelter under that blood, everyone who comes under his covering, is passed over by the angel of death that came all throughout Egypt and slaughtered the firstborn of all the Egyptians. So Pesach is a very significant holy day that every believer should observe. Now, I know that many of you Christians do not believe that you are under the Torah or that you need to observe the Torah, and some of you say we're under grace, we're under this, we're not under... Look, Yeshua said it clearly, so there's no need to argue here. If you believe in Yeshua, then do what Yeshua said. Matthew 5, verse 17 through 19. I did not come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I've come to complete them, to actually manifest them, bring them to their climax, to the actual place where they were leading. Not the smallest letter or a stroke of a pen will be done away with until everything that must happen have happened. If anyone disobeys the least of these commandments, he will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. It's really quite simple. I did not quote for you word for word. I'm pretty sure I left something out about heaven and earth shall pass away, but the word of the Lord stands forever. You read it for yourself. I was not giving you a quotation, but a summation. But the point being, the Torah is very much relevant, and if you dismiss it, you're going to be called the least in the kingdom. You're not necessarily going to go to hell because you didn't celebrate Pesach, but you're going to be called the least. Everything matters. If you can do it, you should do it. Some things we simply cannot do. That's where grace comes in. I can't go to the temple and bring up an offering. There is no temple. But I can observe Pesach in the spirit of Pesach and not eat leavened bread for 7 days, avoid chametz completely, no leavening agents, which nowadays include baking soda, baking powder, dry yeast. For 7 days, just make matzah. It's really simple to make. Anyone can do it, and you can watch in this video at the end of this message. You take a bowl, you put some flour, you put a little salt, a little olive oil, and you add a little water. You stir it up with a tablespoon, and if it's a little too dry, you add a little bit more water. If it's a little too wet, you add a little bit more flour, and you kind of squeeze it together with your hand until you get a nice dough that is not sticky, something that you can play with, that you can ply and shape. And then you take a little board or flat surface, you put it on and you roll it out. You can use your hand to just kind of press it down until it's nice and flat. And then you turn up the heat on the stove, take a large skillet. You can take a fork and poke some holes in your matzah. It helps it cook faster and keeps it from rising. As you can see in the picture, you poke holes in it, keeps it nice and flat, and then you throw it on the nice hot pan and you cook it for 4 to 5 minutes on every side until it looks like that. Real simple. Doesn't take long and it's very inexpensive. And that was the whole purpose. Remember, the Torah was given to a people who just left Egypt. They were in the desert now. They didn't have all these fancy 3 kitchen sets like so many rabbinical Jews now have. They have one kitchen for dairy, one kitchen for meat, one kitchen for Pesach. All of that ridiculous nonsense that is in itself the chametz of the rabbis. The very thing that the Lord warned us about. Yeshua said it to his disciples, be careful about the chametz of the Pharisees. All of that additive stuff that is not from God, but a little leaven leavens the whole loaf. The chametz. So this Pesach, stay away from chametz. Stay away from man-made doctrines. Christian or Jew. Particularly Christian, because, well, that's what most of you are. I'm doing this message in English from the viewpoint that many of you live in America or in the diaspora somewhere. And most of you have come to the faith through Christianity. And of course, this is not a Christian book, it's a Jewish one. And Yeshua was not a Christian, he himself was Jewish. He was born in Judah, in Bethlehem. So there's nothing Christian about this whole thing from start to finish. Nevertheless, Pesach is a most wonderful time to be in fellowship with the Lord, to rejoice in His deliverance, in His salvation, to give Him the glory, and to celebrate, have communion. If you have somebody in your life that is a follower, a believer, that is worthy of sharing the communion, do it with them. If not, do it with the Lord. Just by yourself. Make your little matzah, get a little grape juice. We don't have to drink wine. We'd rather not. Just take some grape juice. You can get it at any store, grape juice. If you don't have grape juice, you can even have it with water. It's fine. It's about the symbol anyway, not the actual thing. It's not blood, it's grape juice, so it doesn't really matter that much. Take some water and do it in His honor, to remember the sacrifice, to give Him the glory. And for 7 days, do not have any bread, do not have any crackers or biscuits or anything baked like that with leavening agents. 7 days. You can do a lot with the matzah. You can make a matzah pizza. You can do a quesadilla with the matzah. You put some cheese and another matzah on top of it and you grill it together. You can put some tomato sauce and a little cheese and some toppings, put it in the oven. There's a lot you can do with matzah. You can even bake cakes. Just don't use any leavening agents. As you see in this video, we made a cake with coconut shreds and some heavy whipping cream and some blueberries and chocolate chips. And it came out wonderful. You don't need baking powder, baking soda, any of these things. And that makes it kosher. And you can have these things during Pesach, and it's wonderful. 7 days to just honor the Lord and give Him the glory, give Him the praise. It is a blessing, not a curse. It is not a burden. It is an honor. So remember, Pesach is the most wonderful time of the year. It is a time of restoration, of renewal, of covenant, of salvation. And everyone who believes in the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov should participate, as long as their hearts are circumcised to the Lord. As it says that no uncircumcised should partake. And in this day and age, since we are not actually partaking in the physical lamb, but in the spiritual one, the circumcision that matters, truly, is the circumcision of your hearts. To have a heart that is sensitive to God. To have a heart that is subservient to God, submitted unto God. That you do His will, that you worship Him, that He truly is your God, and that you honor His holy days. The first day of Pesach you shall do no work, and the 7th day of Pesach you shall do no work. Both are like Shabbat. They are holy days. The days in the middle are fine. You can work, but not the 1st and not the 7th. So praise Papa.
And here is the matzah cooking. Homemade. Well, you should have watched me roll it, but I guess we'll have to do that another day. And it's done.
Don't have to go to the store, don't have to spend 100 shekels. Make it yourself, people.
Make it yourself, people. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.